Hello, and welcome to my spoiler review for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, where I have to say, I continue to be perplexed by the Rotten Tomatoes score for this movie, especially because James Gunn was supposed to have strong media support. Was that just after he was fired from Marvel, and so that he used up that capital for the Suicide Squad Rotten Tomatoes score? It's surprising to me. Maybe his aggressive, more aggressive behavior towards the press on social media is starting to have an effect. He's even been very aggressive against the trades. But maybe this score will get boosted when the fan site press comes online. We're still pretty low in the number of reviews that have been turned in as of the filming of this spoiler review. We've got another 200 to 300 reviews to weigh in. The Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 was only in the mid-80s, so we'll see where this movie ends up. But I'm really surprised. It's one of the MCU's lowest, in fact. And part of me, if you look at a lot of the blurbs, a lot of what bothers some reviewers is the darkness of the movie. And I think it's even more than that. I think it's that it deals extensively with animal cruelty, which is understandably not only very difficult for a number of people, but for a lot of people, it's a deal breaker. So to me, though, this is a brilliant film that partially addresses the inhumane treatment of animals, literally anthropomorphizing them, which means to give them human qualities. I mean, when you think about that, this isn't just something that's done for shock value. I think the movie clearly has a message. In my non-spoiler review, I'd said that the Rocket Raccoon origin scenes were a mix of Sid from Toy Story. That bunny was dark. That bunny was maybe the one step too far. When I saw that, I was like, James Gunn, children are going to see this movie. I don't know how they're going to deal with this bunny man. And then also Okja, itself a powerful film about the inhumane treatment of animals specifically in the food industry. And that, by the way, only has an 86% on Rotten Tomatoes, even though that was a spectacular film. Although it was a little quirky. And this is a little quirky too. Maybe some people in the media don't want, or even audiences don't want to see this kind of commentary from a superhero movie. Maybe they don't think a superhero movie has the right to make such commentary. I do. You might recall that with Winter Soldier, Marvel revolutionized the superhero movie by cleverly melding it with different genres. That was the start of that. Winter Soldier, of course, with the spy genre, and they've been doing that ever since. And it's kept the MCU, to a degree, fresh and interesting. So I think a superhero movie has the right to do whatever it wants as long as it does it well. And again, I would also reference Joker, which also has a weak RT score, but ended up being an Oscar-winning movie. And I loved that film. I don't think this is Joker level, but I don't think it's ridiculous to mention it in the same sentence, because I think this film is, again, very well done. But also, as I said on Movie Math this previous Sunday, maybe the whole subverting expectations problem is in play here. Directors think they're being clever, right? And to some degree they are, but nobody likes to have a trick pulled on them, which is how audiences might feel in some of these cases. And they might feel that way with Guardians of the Galaxy, which I'm about to explain right now. But although, just to further explain where the audience is coming from, when I was talking about Peter Pan and Wendy, also on Movie Math the other day, which also subverts expectations, one of you in the comment section said, when you order a burger, you don't want to get a salad. No matter how good that salad might be, you ordered a burger. And I think you have a point there. I think that was a solid point. But what's wrong with a burger and a side salad, right? That's what I would argue. Salad is good for you. You can't eat nothing but burgers. But I guess, I don't know, some people do, entertainment-wise. I would hope you get a varied diet of entertainment. But what's wrong with a burger and a side salad? Although if you were expecting fries, then yes, you would be quite disappointed. And maybe a burger, fries, and salad is too much. To me, this is a marketing fail. People can enjoy a good salad. You put some nuts and cheese in there. There are some great dressings. Mwah. Panera has a apple barbecue dressing that is just amazing. But nobody likes a surprise salad. You need to tell people you're serving a burger with a salad today. But don't worry, it's a delicious salad. I think that, the advertising campaign needs to have people needs to soften the blow on maybe not make them so subverted. And I would say the same, by the way, about Peter Pan and Wendy. I think a different ad campaign maybe would have helped that movie, be a little bit easier to swallow. Although that movie is problematic and nowhere near as good as Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. But yeah, bottom line, nobody wants a surprise salad. And I think on that, we can all agree. Also, maybe some people might feel a little cheated that none of the Guardians died, despite James Gunn teasing that someone would. Maybe more than one character would die. He probably felt the misdirect was, again, clever. But also, again, it's the whole subverting expectations problem. And people end up feeling duped. They're like, when I said I was going to see this movie, a number of people tweeted me back saying, "Oh, bring tissues." And it's not it's a disturbing film in like, I think, an effective, intentional way. But I certainly wouldn't call this a sad movie. And I wonder if people might not be able to get over that on the initial viewing, and then will they bother to revisit it to maybe appreciate it once they know what they're getting into. So if nobody died, what happened? Well, instead the Guardians disbanded. The group is dead, or at least in the form that you know it. Rocket and Groot, they're the only ones who stayed on the team, and the new lineup is revealed in the first end credit scene, which I'll do a separate video on. But I will say here, it's a pretty lame lineup, but I guess to some degree that's good because it keeps it from overshadowing the movie. But it's also a lame lineup. I think maybe it would have been smarter to just have maybe Rocket, Groot, and Adam Warlock talking about who they could potentially recruit, but then didn't Deadpool already do that with X-Force and Deadpool 2? But it was not a great lineup. Although I did appreciate that a large number of the team members were animals, which also speaks to what this movie is about, right? Dignity for all living creatures. And then Star-Lord returned to Earth to reconnect with his grandfather, who, thankfully was still alive, even though it's been quite some time. And there was an end title card that promised just Star-Lord would return. And I'm like, wait a minute, I have other favorites here that better frickin' return. But maybe the MCU was trying to shut down rumors that they might distance themselves from Chris Pratt with Gunn no longer around to advocate for him. And also maybe that Pratt might jump fully to DC to join Gunn. I mean, he still could, but that title card is like, he's not leaving the MCU, don't worry about it. Nebula and Drax are going to be the mom and dad of Nowhere. I felt bad that Mantis wouldn't let Drax go with her as she left to go find herself. What a missed opportunity for more adventures like the holiday special. They are such a great duo. But then Dave Bautista doesn't want to go on any more Marvel adventures. At least he's smart enough to leave the door open to return, because I don't know if his serious career is going to turn out exactly the way he wants it to. And I would suspect a couple of years down the road, he will come back to the MCU. And I hope reunite with Mantis for an amazing adventure, which will be so fun. Although I wonder if anyone else behind the scenes could write them as well as Gunn does. And then Gamora, what's she gonna do? Well, when she left Peter, finally realizing that maybe she could have fallen in love with him, something that seemed impossible for most of the movie, I was surprised when they parted ways that she didn't say, hey, maybe we could get together sometime. Leave a glimmer of hope for their relationship, since it largely, in Gunn's version, defines both characters. I mean, the whole point of the movie was for Peter to learn to be by himself and not focus on being with women. But while Mantis's metaphor was nice, instead of jumping from lily pad to lily pad, why not learn to swim? We've really only seen Peter on one lily pad, and that's Gamora. So, I mean, they kind of established he was a womanizer, but not so much, not so much. I think part of the reason the character is so likable is that he seems like to some degree, a stand-up guy in his relationship with Gamora. But then if it's all about Peter not being involved with a woman, not defining himself by his romantic situation, then why bother to rekindle the spark with Peter and Gamora at all? Right? Just to stroke Peter's ego, to prove that she too was secretly into him, right? That no one can resist Peter Quill, but we have to part ways. I mean, either we're rekindling this or not, is my opinion. All right, story structure. I thought the movie flowed quite nicely, except for that chunk in the middle with all the friends and family cameos, which changed the movie from this really organic, powerful story to an SNL sketch. That thing was like, it was a blur to me. I was a little, the cameos were taking me out of it a little bit, and I was also getting nervous that the movie wasn't going to get back on track. But thankfully it did, and I went back to it thinking it was brilliant. And I also didn't like the opening long take, which was a little too melancholy for me, especially because the iconic upbeat openings of the first two films, right? Like, why, you're expecting that kind of fun opening, and instead you get like this really grim opening, and you're like, what? The soundtrack here, though, overall is once again quite good, and I like the idea that they load up the Walkman or the whatever, that device, the original Apple device, right? What was it, like an iPod, right? I think that, that was fun because you kind of excited. You'd be like, oh, I wonder what they're going to play. Here we go. So that was very effective. I thought that after that long take, though, the story started off with a bang, literally, with the attack of Adam Warlock. I like that we literally hit the ground, flying. And it was a very thrilling sequence and filmed exceptionally well. Very Superman-y, in fact. Not only was I enjoying the movie, but I was like, oh, look, I see a potential Superman movie, and it looks very good. So that put me in an extra good mood. And as that attack unfolded, and throughout the film, I marveled at how well the trailers were cut, and that scenes that had seemed like third act scenes were actually first or second act scenes, and that the movie had a totally different order than I think was expected from the trailers. And I found that refreshing, particularly in an age when we tend to have figured out most of a movie before we see it. But again, maybe some people feel duped and tricked. Like stuff where you would like, oh, Rocket's dying. He wasn't dying. They were just worried about him. But, you would see that scene and be like, wow, we're very early in the movie. What else is going to happen? I thought that was going to be Endgame. Endgame scenes. But by the way, speaking of injuries, those med packs that can fix anything are quite the writing device. I'm like, that's ridiculous. But they couldn't fix Rocket because Rocket has a fail-safe in his mechanical parts because he's property of the High Evolutionary. And that sets our story in motion. And I loved going back and forth between the story of saving Rocket in the present day and then his origin story in the past. Some people might be bummed that doesn't make Rocket a very big part of the action for most of the movie. But I liked it. I thought it was very effective. I love dark stories, though. To me, this was right up there with Return of the Joker. That's that big reveal, but for like a whole movie. But, that was an animated movie that only hardcore fans saw. Maybe that wouldn't have played to a wide audience either, because that was also quite dark. But that's why I loved it. And as we saw the two stories unfold, past and present, I loved how Rocket's first family mimicked his current family. And I think a lot of people, lost like the Guardians, who make their own families or are searching to make their own families, will be particularly moved by this story. From Rocket and his fellow experiments to then the Guardians and even the Ravagers at the end for Gamora. These are all families. And what's more, all people who've not only made mistakes, but like big, terrible mistakes, which I also think some people can relate to, which is why they're all willing to forgive each other because they're looking for forgiveness as well, which is why I really liked when Groot saved Adam Warlock, even though Adam Warlock had brutally attacked the Guardians at the beginning of the movie. And when Adam Warlock said, "Why would you save me?" Groot said, "Because everyone deserves a second chance." And I think that is, to a point, a beautiful sentiment. Sometimes you can go too far, but, luckily, Adam Warlock had not gone quite too far. I don't know if Groot should have actually spoken at the end of the movie, though. I didn't like that, particularly because I felt it really undercut Gamora having just finally understood him at the end of the movie after reconnecting in a way with the team. There was a gag that she was like, "What? He's not saying anything." And then at the end, she didn't even realize it, but he said something to her, "I am Groot," and she totally understood what he meant. And I thought that was beautiful. So then when he actually talked, I don't know, was it that we were supposed to finally do that? I wish then they had made that more clear. I didn't care for that. And by the way, the fact that Peter wasn't dead after that space jump, that was crazy. I was like, no way. I guess they just wrapped one of those miracle med packs around his swollen, disfigured face, but I was like, I'm pretty sure he died out there. And it was weird, because if they had gotten him just a few seconds before, I would have believed that they could have saved him. But the way they did it, I was like, he's dead. It was a very powerful moment, I felt, that, speaking of family, and that he went back to get his music and then he didn't make it, and the reaction from everybody. And I mean, in a way, I kind of felt his character maybe should have died. That would have been a really amazing ending for him. But then certain groups would have exploded, review bombing the movie, and it wouldn't have been worth it, quite frankly. Wouldn't it be ironic if they still review bombed this movie because of the Disney connection and all that? Now, another reason that I wouldn't kill off Star-Lord, though, is because Chris Pratt continues to do a fantastic job as the character. I mean, wow, he's so good. Such a strong leading man. Sure, some of his jokes and behavior towards women are in poor taste. Some of his jokes and behavior overall, but I think particularly towards women, you know? I mean, Peter Quill really needs to go to sensitivity training. But it's, you know, he's well-meaning. I think that's why he gets away with it. You're like, he just doesn't know better still, right? But I will say he's a very good leader, not only because he inspires confidence and his team loves him, that's really nice, but I think he actually has some pretty good ideas, and he handled himself very well going up against the High Evolutionary especially, and his hench people. I loved when he said to the High Evolutionary, he said, "Oh, now you have time for me? Now you can talk to me?" I thought that was great, and the way it was delivered, the line, I loved it. I also really liked the way Peter handled himself, heck, the whole team handled themselves in the alternate Earth sequence, which still managed to be very surprising despite being shown in the trailers. Like, the whole setup was a surprise, and the way it fit into the story, I really liked it, and getting to meet that whole family, which made it even more tragic when they were killed. But I thought that in addition to also, dealing with the anthropomorphized animals and all that stuff, but I thought that sequence, James Gunn made an interesting choice to give it a Steven Spielberg quality, his early films. And that, I found it quite charming and very effective. I really liked it. And funny, the movie is so funny. The movie's very funny. Some of my favorite bits, it was funny throughout, but some of my favorite bits that I want to give a shout out to are when Peter was spilling his guts to Gamora, but didn't realize he was on the open comm line to all the team in all their suits. And I like the ridiculous way that the color coding was done for the suits. It did make no sense. And the way they tested it, the whole sequence was funny. It kept getting funnier and funnier as it unfolded. And then while Nathan Fillion's cameo was distracting, I did like the bit about I have an annoying subordinate too. And, and it was gold, especially because they did a callback, which is one of the hallmarks of good comedy. So I thought that was great. I was like, that's a funny bit. That's a funny bit. Drax and Mantis, though, overall were the funniest. And so, again, I'm sad to see that duo split up. I'm like, you can't split up that comedy duo. They're one of the great comedy duos at this point. But I do also, though, speaking of funny characters, I do think that fans like to see Rocket Raccoon be funny, and they might be disappointed that he was not at all funny in this movie. Neither was Groot, really. Rocket Raccoon wasn't funny, and Groot was really sidelined. But let's talk characters. Rocket Raccoon. After being comedic relief for 2 movies, I personally really liked getting to know him better, getting to know about his past. Comedy often hides pain, but also to highlight just how smart Rocket is. I mean, that's always been there, but I think they didn't really focus on it. I mean, I think if you were pressed to describe Rocket Raccoon's qualities, a master inventor would be pretty far down the list. But now you're like, how can you not think of that? It's a defining quality. And also, they revealed that he is, in fact, a raccoon, which means he's from Earth, too, by the way, just like Peter. It would have been nice to maybe have a nod to that, a little camaraderie between the two of them, a little, hey, fellow Earther, but, they didn't do that. I thought it was great, though, that the reason the High Evolutionary hated Rocket so much was that Rocket was smarter than him. And that to me was an interesting take on Frankenstein and his monster, because of course the monster is always depicted as having a big heart, but the mentality of a child. Yet here you have someone playing God, and their creation surpasses them. Talk about subverting expectations. And the High Evolutionary did not appreciate it either. This kind of jealousy is very real in some people, and I felt Chikuti Iwuji played it brilliantly. So, High Evolutionary. Let's talk about the High Evolutionary. Sure, he monologued, but thanks to a great script and Iwuji's performance, it never felt like he was monologuing. Oh, it was great. He was like Lex Luthor meets Dr. Frankenstein meets Norma Desmond, and I felt it was just a captivating combination. He also had, I guess the Norma Desmond stuff, a little Disney evil stepmother in there too, like, oh yeah, you can go to the ball, not. I loved it. And I agree with Gunn that he is the MCU's, I think probably, I would agree, most evil villain. I really would. Gunn has also said he took inspiration from the island of Dr. Moreau, which of course is brilliant because that also involved creating a society of animals, and it did not turn out so great. I'm not too familiar with that story, so emotionally that reference doesn't hit for me as much as the other ones that I made, But intellectually, it's just another example of how brilliant the role is written. I'm like, that's a good one. Makes me want to go read The Island of Dr. Moreau. I mean, I've already seen this movie, but if I were making this movie, I certainly would have read that. And I'm sure Owuji did. Mantis. Just like in the holiday special, I think Pom Klementieff has really come into her own with this role. Both funny and smart. And just like with Infinity War, I'm also happy that she can hold her own in a fight. So good. But one moment that really stuck with me was when, I loved also when she said she wanted one of those nuts and Drax was like, all out. And then he ate another one. I was like, so funny. But the moment that really stuck with me was when she admitted to Drax that she thought he was stupid. And that hurt his feelings so much. I think particularly because he cared about Mantis. And then she decided to make him forget, which is really on shaky moral ground. I mean, I guess you could argue in either direction. Why ruin their relationship? But at the same time, she's walking around thinking he's stupid. I think he deserves to know, quite frankly. But I mean, it doesn't make me dislike the character of Mantis. It just, to me, makes her more interesting. And there's so much left to unpack with her. I really hope that she returns. I question who could write these characters as well as Gunn, particularly with the poor track record Marvel has had recently of hiring other writers. I'm like, oh no, don't give these characters to the Rick and Morty writers. But I hope they can find someone because these characters are just too good to get rid of. Drax. Nebula says at the end she finally understands Drax, that he isn't just a walking liability, but that he was meant to be a dad. To all the children that the High Evolutionary created, but of course that's also meant to be a reference to the daughter that he lost, that set him on the journey. But you wouldn't really realize that unless you were familiar with the comic book character, because in these movies, they haven't really done a lot with Drax being sad about his wife, losing his wife and daughter. I mean, I think they mentioned it, but it really hasn't been something that I think has been a defining part of his character. I felt the ending was actually sad, not only because Drax and Mantis split up, but I don't think any part of him wanted to stay behind and watch after all those kids. He was like, F them kids, like that meme goes. I think he just stayed because Mantis wouldn't let him go with her, and he didn't know what else really to do with himself, and this opportunity just presented itself, and I think he did feel some responsibility. So he stepped up, but I honestly don't think that he wanted to. I don't think he was at all torn. If Mantis had been like, let's go, he would have been like, see ya, kids. Again, F them kids. But Dave Bautista, he was great here. Tons of fantastic jokes. Perfect delivery. And when I was writing my notes for the spoiler review, I too, like Nebula, cannot really figure out what he brings to the team. And even his strength, I don't really think, Cosmo at the end held those two ships together. But what I settled on? I'd say that Drax brings personality to the team. And I mean that with all sincerity. I can't imagine the team without him. Nebula. I love me an anti-hero, as many of you know, and Nebula has become a fantastic one. Plus Rocket's upgrades are fantastic. The arm that can turn into a blaster is among other things. Her brief ability to fly, she looks so cool. To her being able to fix herself like a broken doll, which means there's so little organic material left in there. And also a broken doll is just a perfect way to describe Nebula. She's actually, as she says, a lot like Rocket, both of them experimented on, although she realizes with horror that what happened to Rocket was even worse than what Thanos did to her. And I loved highlighting how she's a living computer. I love the code on her eyes, her black eyes like computer screens, and the code going across them, and then her arm plugging into a High Evolutionary ship like Cyborg so she could pilot it. It was great. She's very cyborgy. I love it. I'm disappointed that the character's been retired. I don't think looking after Nowhere is really what Nebula would do, quite frankly. And I hope she doesn't do it for long. Let's get her in Armor Wars. She's just too good. Again, another character too good to bench, especially if the actor is willing to come back. Because Dave Bautista's not willing to come back, and neither is Zoe Saldana. So let's talk about Gamora. Some people have said, when are we going to get a Nebula and Gamora Disney Plus series? Sisters on an adventure. But I think the answer is never, because as I said, Zoe Saldana doesn't want to come back either. But while I think Dave Bautista should definitely come back, I understand and support Zoe Saldana's decision. Gamora never had a lot of gas in the tank to begin with as a character, and she's just run out. And I think I'm still feeling bad, as I said before. I want Zoe Saldana to go find that role. She's in all these big movies, but she never has a role that I think really resonates as her role. Like people are always like, oh yeah, look at all the amazing movies Zoe Saldana is in. Wouldn't it be great if she could, for once, be front and center and be recognized, first for her work? So I want her to go find that role. She's got the resume now. Go find that role. I mean, she's not even the leader of the Ravagers here, which was also promised. Sylvester Stallone still is. And she's only an okay fighter, to be honest with you. Like when they had that big hallway fight and I was like, everyone was doing amazing stuff. I was like, oh, wait, where's Gamora? And then she was at the very end and she wasn't as impressive as the other fighters, quite frankly. I guess, she went last and she should have been the big finale to that sequence. But instead I was just like, yeah, not as much flair as the others, I have to say. And she was not a good strategist either. Right? I mean, in fact, it was downright stupid to just send her coordinates to whoever that dude was that Ayesha took the communicator from. Just some random Ravager. Wouldn't you at least make sure you were giving it to Sylvester Stallone or the main Ravager ship? I mean, I was surprised at how sloppy she was. I mean, I know she was upset, but that was just, I wouldn't think Gamora would make a mistake like that. The Ravagers sure were cool, though. That one red snake guy, you know who I'm talking about. You know who I'm talking about. So cool. That guy should get a Disney Plus show. No, he shouldn't. Too many Disney Plus shows. But I liked that guy. He was amazingly well realized and so cool. Ayesha and Adam Warlock. This is the best I've ever seen Elizabeth Debicki look as this character. Although James Gunn's weird obsession with trashing moms is getting a little tiresome, particularly because my mom's so awesome. I mean, sure, there are some difficult moms out there, but every time we got to trash the moms. Although, thanks to Will Poulter, I did feel his loss still. And, people still miss even a bad mom, because still mom. And when she was killed by the High Evolutionary's alternate Earth exploding, I felt that. That was very well done. Will Poulter's role is, again, very small here. But I thought he did an excellent job with what he was given. And as I said, his quirkiness is a very good match with the Guardians of the Galaxy brand. He works for me as Adam Warlock, actually. And also, he's just so powerful. Oh, I love characters like that. It's great to watch. But Icarus, Sentry, Adam Warlock, all cut from the same cloth. So why not just have one who you really get to chew, to bite into, rather than having just do all three of these? Well, I mean, we've already only seen two of the three, so we'll see what they do with Sentry, who I feel is who I saw. I actually saw a picture of the costume. It's so comics accurate, but it can stand totally on its own. It's a little like the Shazam suit in that way. But anyway, I think the MCU is expanding maybe a little too rapidly, and they introduce these characters, they just throw them out there without really developing them. But they're fun to watch. Again, I do love watching powerful characters cook. All right, then Groot. At first, I really hated his new bro look. I was like, whoa, he looks like he's from Jersey Shore. But it turns out it's so versatile. First, he used his roots to expand the plates to make himself huge, which was very unexpected, and I loved it. And then a bigger trunk allows him to hide weapons inside there when they entered the High Evolutionary's headquarters. And I was like, you know what? I don't think that design looks very good, but it's very effective, so I guess we'll keep it. Still, again, as I said, I can see why maybe some people would be disappointed as fan favorites Rocket Raccoon and Groot are sidelined here. Although that was a nice callback to their team up in the first movie, that shot. But they're sidelined and or portrayed quite differently. Like, for instance, that whole thing about Groot's character development via reincarnation, right? Like, first he was a child again, then he was a surly teenager, and then they just dropped that. They just dropped that whole through line. So that is a little sloppy. But it didn't bother me because I was enjoying the rest of the movie so much. Kraglin? Let's face it, Sean Gunn is fine, but he's no Michael Rooker. Even when Michael Rooker showed up for just a second, you were like, he was great. And then finally, Cosmo and Lylla. Both are voiced by women, and both have very small roles. I felt Maria Bakalova's character, as I said in the non-spoiler review, I felt that role was kind of misogynistic the way it was handled. It just didn't sit right with me. But Linda Cardellini, she did some really beautiful work as Lylla. So much emotion in her performance. In the comics, Lylla is Rocket Raccoon's girlfriend. So I actually applaud James Gunn's restraint in deciding to instead just focus on the friendship there. That they were friends, they were family. Because then it would be too much like Peter and Gamora, I think, in a way. And the scene where Rocket Raccoon is reunited with his animal friends in like the afterlife was genuinely a surprise and genuinely very moving. I was like, whoa, are we doing this? I got right up to crying. And it was very moving thanks to the script and Bradley Cooper and Cardellini's performances. Same with the moment where the High Evolutionary kills Rocket Raccoon's first family and then leaves him alive, presumably until morning, just to be cruel. Rocket Raccoon's vicious response, again, works because of what was done to lead up to that moment. They did it beautifully. And then when he escaped to get to a rocket, his namesake that he chose, seeing the outside world for the first time and living up to the name, the goal and what he dreamed and hoped for himself, that he would get to go on a rocket and fly free out into space for adventures and invent cool stuff. I mean, I was on the edge of my seat. I was like, go rocket, go. I thought it was very moving, very moving. It was Pixar-y in a good way. All right, so that's my spoiler review for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. A really moving and incredible film. Not a perfect movie, but so good for the vast majority of it that I really enjoyed it. We'll see how it does with mainstream audiences, as it has a lot of outside baggage with both Disney and James Gunn, the whole DC thing, James Gunn's past controversies, his problems with the press. And again, it subverts expectations, which it turns out audiences do not care for many times. And it's also very, very dark. And the animal cruelty might be a deal breaker for, we'll see, it might be a deal breaker for a lot of people. But I loved it. Those are my thoughts, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts down below. So, and also stay tuned for lots more coverage. Share those thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.